Good evening. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It's a very special shir. I want to thank Rabbi Haber. We're here from tremendous remarks right momentarily. It's being presented by Chazaq and the Shul, Congregation Anshe Shalom, Jamaica Estates. I want to thank the Shul and Mr. Jack Abraham for all the tremendous work they do for the community. And we're talking about revealing the light of Pesach, and it's a very apropos topic tonight because we're talking about, obviously, we have so many dedications for tonight, and a special dedication for the neshama of Yair Netzer. And we know that Yair means to bring light into this world. And we know, if you look at a menorah, a Hanukkah menorah, what is it? You have different candles, different wicks, but it's all under the same base. And that's what this tonight, if you look at the flyer, you have Chazaq partnering together with the Shul and so many different organizations, everyone united under the banner of Torah and Mitzvot. We have together with House of Torah, Emet Outreach. We have the house. We have one big heart, Shari Shalom, Bet El, and it's tremendous. Everyone's joining it together. It's being dedicated in Leilui Nishmat, in loving memory of Yair Netzer, Zichron Levracha, Ben Avraham, V'Tzipor Nisanian, should live and be well, as well as Beila Chana Bat Yerucham Fishel, and Sarah Bat Yosef Rivka, and Chaim Victor Ben Avraham V'Chaya, Bat Sheva Bat Rachel, Yosef Gideon Yaakov Ben Yitzchak V'Pnina, Menachem Ben Mordechai, Bat Sheva Bat Yosef Tzaddik, and Refuah Shlema of Daniel Aaron Moshe Ben Ruth. I want to thank Sarah Mashaeli and Talia Shoshani and Jack Abraham. A round of applause for having tonight's event. And one quick word before we're going to hear some opening remarks from Rabbi Nisanian is talking about the light that our fellow brothers and sisters down the block in our neighborhoods, they don't see the light of the Torah and the mitzvot. They're not privy to that, to the honor of the Jewish education. So Chazaq is there through after school and Sunday school programs in 15 different communities and in 15 different locations, inspiring the Jewish public school students, our fellow brothers and sisters who might just live literally down the block. And in the last, since 2017, over 1,200 children were transferred from public school to yeshiva. So everyone right here, anyone who's watching online, they should definitely reach out to Chazaq to refer students to them to Chazaq. It will be a tremendous schus, and there's a great honor to call upon. We want to thank Rabbi Nisanian, Rabbi Nisanian for the years and years of dedication to the community. B'chavod, Rabbi Nisanian, to open remarks.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. This is an opportunity that we have to memorize our son and my daughter and my wife. Baruch Hashem, they came out with this wonderful program of Light It Up in the event that unfortunately throughout the years we kind of distancing ourselves from ourselves. And in this flyer, they came up with 40 easy items that we can light up someone else's day, life, and so on and so on. If you just read all of them, you can choose one a day or one for a lifetime. Smile to someone, for example. Say hello to someone, and so on and so on. I don't want to take so much of the time. Thank you very much for coming, and Be'ezrat Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach.
It's a tremendous honor to be here, and I really want to thank you very much for having us tonight. It's an event that's dedicated in memory of really a special young man who passed away 20 years ago, Yair Netzer ben Avraham V'Tzipora, and the light that he brought to the world, and the light that we hope Bezrat Hashem tonight to be able to continue to bring to the world in his memory. And it's also Leilui Nishmat Beila Chana Bat Yerucham Fishel. And as the girls and her friends wrote, she passed away a year ago. Rebecca, as her friends called her Becky, was a friend to all. Her smile knew how to turn a frown upside down. Her love and care never went unnoticed. Her ability to accept all those that came her way will forever be remembered. We hope to keep her legacy of unity and oneness alive. To commemorate two events 19 years apart that in certain ways are so sad, and try to do our best. You being here tonight is honoring these nishamot and honoring these lives, and Bezrat Hashem doing great things in their memory. And our hope is that tonight we could bring light in the memory of this young man and this young woman, and also in memory of Sarah bat Yosef and Rivka, and Chaim Victor ben Abraham and Chaya, and Yosef Gidon Yaakov ben Yitzchak and Rina. So all of these neshamot that we're commemorating, sometimes the truth is, as I'm reading the names, I'm having a hard time even continuing thinking about the pain. We've just read 5 different people and the pain that came from it. But hopefully it's our responsibility, if you're here tonight, to try and elevate the world in their memory. And also Refuah Shlema of Daniel, Aaron, Moshe ben Ruth. It's a good tune. We're going to talk tonight about light. But before you understand light, you need to understand darkness. Because light is only appreciated against the darkness. And I think each generation has its own darkness. There were generations that the darkness of the time was a Holocaust or an Inquisition or a Chazaq or a crusade. Or the Holocaust of the time was an extreme poverty and people living without any clothing to wear or food to eat. But I think the darkness of our time is different. Most people have food to eat and clothing to wear and a house to live in. Most people are not afraid of a world war or an enemy around the corner that's going to create extreme danger. Because for most of us, our enemy in the 2020s isn't over there. The enemy is over here. And for most people, what generates their most frustration are the things that they obsess over. Which means that when someone obsesses over food, it often generates a lot of frustration. I don't have enough food. I ate more. I want to eat food. I had that item. I had that thing. That's the way it was eaten. Someone who obsesses over sports, they're usually mad about this team that lost and the other team that won and the other team that's losing, and how could it be, and why did the guy get injured? It doesn't make sense. And they're mad about their sports. That's what they obsess over it, and it creates frustration. People that are obsessed over business and they're always thinking and worrying about business, it drives them crazy. People who obsess over money and it's all they care about, all they talk about, always feel like they don't have enough. People that obsess over friends. If you have a young child who obsesses over friends, a 15-year-old girl cares about her friends and she's totally consumed with her friends. Every time something goes wrong with the friends and she doesn't get a phone call back, it ruins her entire night. People that are obsessed with popularity. Whenever it feels like they're not as popular as they thought, they get crazy. And people who obsess over other people's opinions. Also, those opinions can get them nuts. That's the darkness of our day. The darkness of our day is for most people in their minds. And for most people, the bondage that we are experiencing is literally in our mind. The Gemara famously says that we have Adar next to Nisan. We're right now in the last few days of Adar, going right into Nisan, because both of them are when we commemorate a Geulah. Adar was a Geulah, and Nisan is a Geulah. So we're going to learn a little bit from the story of Adar, and that'll take us into the story of Nisan. And the story of Adar, we're going to see one person who, although he lived over 2,000, over 2,300 years ago, is a great example of modern darkness and modern bondage. And then, over the course of the night, we're then going to transition into understanding and appreciating the light. Who's the greatest example of a man who lived in this kind of suffering? The answer is Haman. Haman said the words that make no sense. We're used to it, but it makes no sense. All of this is not worth it to me as long as I see Mordechai sitting Beshar HaMelech. What does that even mean? You're second in command. You're incredibly wealthy. You're the most powerful person on the earth. You have everything you can want, a home, wife, children, every single thing possible. How is it possible to say the words that it's not worth anything to me? The answer is, you're a slave. You're a slave to your mind. And what happens to our minds is you get a little thing inside of your mind. The Ben Ish Chai explains this on Haman. He says Haman had a little thing in his mind, and he was so taken and so consumed, so obsessed, and because of that so frustrated, that because of it he had to make a gallows that was 50 amot. Which is, according to some opinions, 100 feet in the air. Why do you need 100 feet gallows? You want to know how it works? You want to kill someone? A gallows 15 feet high does the trick. Why do you need 100 feet in the air? The answer is he lived in a time when there were no skyscrapers. There were just regular houses. He needed anywhere he was in Shushan, he needed to be able to see the gallows, because when his head was clouded, he would say, it's okay. The gallows are up. Mordechai is going to be killed soon. That was the only way that he could free up his brain. Because or else he has to see the gallows constantly. It's the only way he could free up his brain. He went in the morning to the king, the palace of the king, because he wanted to go early enough to not see Mordechai, because if he would see Mordechai, he'd be done. Have you ever had that experience? Where you have one person that triggers so much craziness in your head? Don't shake your head. Don't admit it in public. That could trigger so much craziness in your head, doesn't even make sense. And the reason why you can't say it in public, because if you actually try to share it with a friend, they'll think you hit your head on the wall. They'll think there's something wrong with you. So you just have to sit there in your own darkness and your own slavery. I'm telling you, sometimes we have, it's literally like I want to imagine it this way, sometimes like a cartoon character, a little guy that goes into your brain, and he just sits there and you can't get him out. And he's there rent-free. He doesn't pay for it. And he just sits in your brain, and you think about him, and you think about him, and you think about him. And if he only knew how much you thought about him, he wouldn't believe it. And you just think about him, and he doesn't go anywhere. You go eat lunch, you're thinking about him. You go to your friend's house, you're thinking about him. And you can't get it out of your brain. And you're so stuck. And sometimes you watch people in this situation, they completely lose focus. And you want to tell them, like, just move forward. Whatever you're thinking about, jealous of, angry at, just move forward. You'll do unbelievably well, but you can't because you're completely stuck. I'll give you a real example. I know these people fairly well. There was someone who had a business, two brothers. What should we call the business? I don't want to give me a business that two brothers could be involved in, that they sell to people. Give me a business. I'm trying to change the details so no one knows what I'm talking about. What?
Diamonds.
Diamonds? Okay, very good. So you had one brother, he was sold diamonds, he sold jewelry. Okay? He didn't, but was for this, he did. Okay, he sold jewelry. And for years, he had his younger brother working for him. One day, a few years ago, his younger brother left the company and took his customers with him. The older brother cannot think straight. The older brother wants to blow up a building and then build it to blow it up again. I am telling you, the brother cannot. The two of them together destroyed the family. Any family member that goes to his wedding can't go to his wedding. Siblings, because they're completely consumed. And I've had conversations with the older brother, and I say, you know what? Yes, he took some of your customers, but he also took his salary that he was taking. It's pretty much a wash. The salary he's making is pretty much the customers. Just cut him out. Don't think about it. But every time you do, and if you ever sell someone a diamond and the person says, oh no, I don't need the diamond because I already went to your brother. You're out for 6 months. You can't talk to you anymore. You have him in your brain, and he's hanging out in your brain. You go take a shower, your brother's in your brain. You go eat dinner, your brother's in your brain. You have a conversation with your wife, your brother's in your brain. And he's hanging out in your brain. Sometimes he pulls a beach chair. He's sitting there, never leaving. And you let him there. You're such a slave. You're in such darkness. Not because anyone did anything to you. Your business is fine. You have plenty of customers who still want to buy jewelry from you. Yes, every now and then you bump into a customer who may frustrate you, but you could keep going. Just keep focused. But you can't focus. You can't think straight because you're completely consumed with this little guy in your brain. And you know what often happens when you have this little obsession in your brain? Exactly what happened to Haman. You know what happened with his obsession? You know what his obsession caused? He built a gallows. You know who got hung on the gallows? He did. And so often the thing you're obsessing about, you're trying, you're mad, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're jealous, you're anxious. All those things, they're not doing anything to him. They're just destroying you. And you're building a gallows to hang yourself with your thoughts. With that little cartoon character walking around in your brain, hanging out there, having fun inside, have no place to go because he knows you're just going to think about him forever. When the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, it seems that they even had a little bit of this inside of them, and that's why they built the Egel. The Erev Rav, Pasuk says, the Erev Rav left with the Jewish people. And they went with Son Ubakar Mikneh Kaved Me'od. The Jewish people left Egypt, left Mitzrayim with a lot of sheep and cattle, a lot. And the Midrash says that when they left with all the sheep and the cattle and everything they went with, that's how it was Mikayem Achar Ken Yetzu Berchush Gadol. They left with wealth because they left with all this cattle. So what does it mean? They left with the cattle, they left with wealth. I saw a beautiful thought. It says, you know what it is? The Jewish people, and also you're putting it in the Pasuk with the Erev Rav. Why is that connected? The answer is this. When the Jewish people left Egypt, they took a lot of gold and silver. Right? They took a lot of gold and silver. But the Egyptians still had more. Because the Midrash famously says that once the sea split, the Jewish people got more at the sea than they did in Mitzrayim. So that means what they took from Mitzrayim when they left was less than what the Egyptians had. The Egyptians still had more. I believe the Kitab Sofer says, you know what that means? That when the Jews were leaving, they had a lot, but the Egyptians had more. So because of that, it felt like nothing to them. It felt like they had nothing. All of this is not worth anything to me because I know I am getting a lot, but he has more than I do. And so because of that, I feel poor. The only reason they felt wealthy is because the Erev Rav came with them, and the Erev Rav were really poor. So because they had Erev Rav, that allowed them to feel like they had wealth. You ever have that the cartoon character is in your head and you're obsessing, and then all of a sudden you hear one person has a horrible story, and for a minute you feel like, oh, you know what, my life's not so bad. Just now driving here, I was on the phone. And whatever, my father's in the hospital, I don't feel so great tonight. I'm driving, I'm on the phone, and you start to feel a little sorry for yourself. I was on the phone with a woman who has challenges, whatever. She's aguna for the last 10 years. And she can't find a husband. Like, she doesn't know, but there's almost no solution. I was like, oh, you know what? We'll all feel great when you hear one other person's story. We're crazy. Our brains, the way they work, is crazy. And that's why when the Jewish people built the Egel, the Erev Rab says to the Jewish people, Ela Elohecha Yisrael, this is your God that took you out of Egypt. What does it mean, this is your God? How can anyone have the audacity to say, this is your God that took you out of Egypt? The answer is that they saw the Jewish people be so concerned about money that they left Egypt with the money and they didn't feel good enough until someone else was really, really poor. And then at the Kriyat Yam Suf, they also got excited over money. They said, you know what, this gold and the Egel, that's what got you out of Egypt. That's the only thing you were thinking about. That is the definition of the bondage of our time. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll start talking about light. There's a Gemara, Masechet Gitin. The Gemara writes, when the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, the Roman general destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, and then he wanted to go and retire. So he moved to an island, says the Gemara, and when he got to the island, he basically was defiant. They said, Hashem could never get me. A little fly went into his nose. And that fly, a little teeny fly, went into his nose and started pecking away at his brain. That's what the Gemara says. Pecking away at his brain. And pecking away. Until he couldn't think straight. He just was pecking away at his brain. Until one time, he was walking by a blacksmith who was banging with a hammer, and it calmed down the fly. So he would hire a person every day, and sometimes force a Jew to do it every day, to bang with the hammer to calm down the fly. And for 30 days it worked. And then after 30 days, it didn't work anymore. And it kept banging and banging away. The Gemara says for the last 7 years of his life, that little fly kept pecking away at his brain. When he finally passed away, they opened up his brain and saw the little fly was the size of a big bird. And the Gemara says it had a beak that was out of like metal, iron beak and iron claws. I don't know what it means in a literal sense, but I know what this means in a figurative sense in a great way. So many of us allow a little fly to get into our brain. And when it enters, it's not a big deal. I'm just a little annoyed at that person. And next thing you know, it stays there and it pecks away and pecks away. And sometimes there's so much noise in your brain. And then you have something that calms you down. Maybe you turn on the radio, or you turn on some music. Or maybe if someone watches something on an iPad and they say, you know what, it's the only thing that could calm my brain is this show. If I watch the show, it'll calm my brain. And it works for a few days. And then before you know it, the pecking is so hard that even that doesn't work. And this little fly is an example of how so many of us act and think. And this is the darkness. Everyone has a house. Everyone has clothing. Everyone has food. Most people have a car. Everyone has a phone. You notice there's more phones than cars. Everyone has basic needs. The issue we have is the cartoon character in our brain. The issue we have is this little fly that drives us crazy. So how do we solve it? How do we bring light? Does anyone disagree on my darkness? Does anyone think that am I right, that this is so often just our thoughts that we're struggling with? So we're going to figure out today how to create freedom, because we're now going into the month that we celebrate freedom. And I think the answer is that a lot of us would love for freedom to be just press a button and solve all my problems. Just make all the noise go away. If I could just press a button and make all the noise go away, that would be wonderful. The reality is the only way for a person's noise to go away is for them pretty much not to be alive. As long as you're alive, there's noise in the brain. But what can we do? The answer is, I think, lies in what we're here for tonight. We could do something small that leads to something big. Because the holiday of Pesach, the number one feature of what Pesach is about, is the difference between chametz and matzah. What is the difference between chametz and matzah? 1 second. The difference between something that if you eat it, you're chayav karet, one of the worst punishments in the Torah, or something that if you eat it, you're doing a mitzvah, is 1 second. Less than 18 minutes, it's a mitzvah of matzah. More, 1 second more, and it is chametz and yechayav karet. The difference between the great mitzvah and the great sin is simply 1 second. 1 second makes the whole difference. And you know what? So much of life is that way. So many of our mitzvot are that way, but so much of life is this way. 1 second that you make, if anyone here know anything about sports, sometimes you're being this frustrating. The ball went 1 inch out of bounds, it's out, and it's off you, and the other team gets it. It stays 1 inch inbounds, and you have the ball back, and you could shoot, and you could win the game. Foul ball, touch, everything is a split second. And so often things are this close. That's how it boils down to life, is to that one small moment. So every one of you has a list here in front of you. Everyone has one in your hand? Now, I'm not going to read through all 40 items. But in reviewing it quickly today, there were a few of them that stuck out of my mind. And so I want to read and show you and see how these little ideas, this 1 minute item, 1 second item, how this little idea that was created by the Nisani girl, what's her first name? Moria Nisani. You did a wonderful job. I don't know where she is. Where is she? Yeah. In there? You did a wonderful, wonderful job. I'm going to take this home just because I'm going to share it with my own children. Because I think this is fantastic. And let's go through a few of these because you'll see how there's so much light in these examples. Number 1, genuinely greet 3 people with a simple hello and hi. Do you know how many times I've had in my life that people have been insulted from me? Why are you insulted? I'm a very nice person. I don't usually say insulting things. You know what happened? I walked by them and didn't notice them. And they feel like, oh, the rabbi doesn't care about me, he doesn't love me, and I'm not so important, I'm not wealthy enough, whatever nonsense they come up with. When you turn to a person and say hi, it matters. My father just spent the last month in a hospital. He went into cardiac arrest on President's Day, and he got out of the hospital today. He's still in very serious condition. And in the beginning when we got there, all of the nurses hated us. Because we're Baruch Hashem family and we're all there and we keep coming back and they want the masks and the COVID. You know COVID's still dangerous, right? You know that? So they're all upset. There's too many of us in the waiting room. If one sibling of mine would sleep in the waiting room, somehow it puts the whole hospital in danger. I'm not understanding. But this is what it was like. But you know what we did? We just kept saying hi. I kept saying hi. And before you know it, there was one guy at the front desk. This guy, I came one time on a Motzei Shabbat, and they didn't want to let me in. And the guy, I see him talking to the other person behind the desk. And he starts telling the other person behind the desk, it's a woman, he says, my dad taught me it's a dog-eat-dog world. That's what he said. Okay. The next time I came back to the house, I was like, hey, sir, it's a dog-eat-dog world, man. And I said it a few times, and I can't believe I remember it. And before you know it, by today, I cannot tell you, each one, we had doctors walk into the room and saying, when I get old, I want your family. Just because we said hi. In fact, there was a non-Jewish family on the same floor. They have 3 sons. And my mother, if I'm good at this, my mother is like 10 times better at this than I am. One of the people on the floor said, that lady, she's the uplifting lady. All she did is say hi and be friendly. Number 2, go out of your way to simply thank someone in your family, or especially for something that I'm going to give you a little example here. There are times where I speak to all kinds of crowds, right? Last night, I spoke in Shaarei Tzion to, let's say, 700 people. I'm pretty confident it was a good speech. How many people do you think came over to me afterwards to say, wow, thank you, Rabbi, that was fantastic? There's 700 people in the room. I think like 6. You know, because most people say, oh, he made good speech. He knows. I don't have to tell him, he knows. And so we all think this way. Yeah, mommy knows our dinner was great. Yeah, daddy knows I appreciate it. She knows that was good. Obviously, she did me a favor. She knows I appreciate. Get up and say something. And I will tell you, after speaking for a lot of years to a lot of different audiences and a lot of people, I appreciated every one of those 6 people. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I still care. But that is just how we are. Each person and the way they said it. I could tell the difference between someone said, Rabbi, that was a good speech, and someone who said that was a great speech. I'm admitting that I'm nuts. Excuse me for doing so. But that's just how it went. When someone says, wow, that was great, and someone else says, I was blown away, makes a difference. But people appreciate a thank you. We're all working way harder than we ever expected. Every single one of us in this room work way harder than we ever expected. And the biggest thing we want is someone to really appreciate it. I'm going to skip a few. Number 6, talk to Hashem for 30 seconds. You know what? We have tefillot. And the sad thing about tefillah nowadays is that a lot of young people don't appreciate tefillah so much. Because it's the same words again and again. Some people don't know the Hebrew. And even if they do, the fact that it's the same again and again, they're used to screens that are showing different scenes every 2 seconds, and now they have to read the same words again and again. Sometimes what makes tefillah come alive, whether it's at the end of the Amidah, or even just standing on your own, is when you just turn to Hashem and you talk to Him. He's your Father. He loves you. It's liberating to be able to say clearly, Hashem, I am struggling with this, and I need you to lift me up. Articulate what it is in English to Him directly. Number 7, treat others with respect. There's a lot of different people on the planet. A lot. I think we're up to 8 billion. What's the number? I think it's 8 billion. There's 8 billion people on the planet. I have yet to meet one human being that doesn't want respect. Respect doesn't mean the whole room, wow. Respect just means treat me like a person. Look me in the eyes. Say thank you. Tell me, appreciate me, acknowledge me, give me respect. I have yet to meet a human. It doesn't mean that some people like a lot of attention, some people don't like a lot of attention, but everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to be noticed. Everyone wants to be appreciated. Everyone wants respect. And then number 9, there is, if we could talk about slavery in our time, there is no greater slavery than this one. And I'll explain it this way. The Pasuk says that we worked in Egypt, avodat perach. One of the commentaries said, what does perach mean? It means back-breaking labor. It says perach means perach, a soft mouth. That means Paro, with sweet talking, sweet talked us into bondage. And you say, that doesn't make sense. How can you sweet talk someone into being a slave? You could sweet talk someone into doing you a favor, but how could you softly talk someone into going from being free to being a slave? Here's my answer. Steve Jobs did the exact same thing. He sweet talked everyone on this planet into slavery. He said, just buy this device. Put it in your pocket. It has Waze on it. It even has a Siddur, and it has Torah anytime. It is unbelievable. And you said, wow, I could have a Siddur and Waze, and I could buy things, and the things that I buy come to my house in a box with a smile on the box, and I have Torah on it. This is the most incredible device. And if you remember when you first bought it, you said, I am so lucky. I have this, and you couldn't believe how smooth the screen was and how words just came out. You didn't even print the word. It just knew what you were saying by itself. And you couldn't believe the things you could see and the experiences you could have. And those of us in this room that are a little older, remember once upon a time when we didn't know something like about a certain person or a state. Maybe we would go to the library and walk in the freezing cold and get to the library, and they had these books called encyclopedias. There were a lot of volumes. And you had to figure out, was it O or OL is the one that is the book that is I'm in, and then you pull out the book and you turn to the state, and now all of a sudden on my phone I just click in some, Ohio, and you get a whole thing about Ohio, and it tells you everything you need to know about it. And you're like, wow, this is unbelievable. And all you did the first few weeks would be so excited about how liberating this phone is to your life. And then all of a sudden, you don't remember when it happened. All of a sudden, one day you woke up and you said, hey, I am a slave. Steve Jobs, avodat perach. He sweet-talked you into slavery. I bet you there's not so many people in this room that could go to sleep at night without their phone within arm's length. They don't have food within arm's length. They don't have their children within arm's length. They don't have their money within arm's length. They don't have their clothing within arm's length. They don't have their car keys in arm's length. They don't have the light to the room is not. The only thing that's within arm's length is their phone. Well, the phone actually has the light to the room sometimes, so that might solve both problems. The phone has to be there. Because if chas v'shalom, God forbid, if a light is going to flicker and you don't see it and you don't quickly respond to it, you're not going to be able to sleep. People wake up in the middle of the night. Sometimes you wake up 4 o'clock in the morning quickly. Maybe someone has to go to the restroom or someone needs a quick cup of water. They wake up in the middle of the night, and what do? Grab their phone. Because we are slaves. So how about if you try number 9? Purposely put down and away. You put your phone down and away for 5 minutes. There are people who can't do this, by the way. I'm going to skip again. Number 13. Think of I'm going to give you this when this happened. If you think of at least 3 things to thank Hashem for. Friday night, I had a very long day on Friday. Speeches in different places, an event that we made on Friday night for boys in the Syrian community. By the time I went to sleep that night, I was exhausted. And it felt like just a draining day. And then I said, you know what? I did this exactly. I said, let me come up with 3 things I could thank Hashem for. And before you know it, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I came up with 11 things that were spectacular, like not just cute. Everyone likes, oh, my eyes and my ears, it's cute, but that doesn't get you excited. 11 things that got me excited. I said, I can't believe this. My day was incredibly good. How many more should I do? I'll give you 3 more. Number 16. Think of something that happened to you that you thought was a problem but ended up being a great blessing. If I were to ask every person in this room, do you have something right now about this week that you are worried about? Every single person would raise your hand. If you're honest, some people aren't honest. But if you are honest, if I ask you, is there anything about your week that you are worried about? Every person in this room could raise their hand. Now let me ask you something else. Has Hashem taken care of that problem for you or for somebody else 1,000,000 times? Yes. So why are you still worried? Sometimes you have to stop and say, 1 second, I am really concerned about this, but Hashem has delivered again and again and again and again. He could probably deliver for me too. Turn the page to number 23. I'm just saying number 23. I don't know if it's the most powerful one, most important one. But I'm going to admit another thing about me. That's why I like number 23. Declutter. I don't know too many other men that are like me. I happen to be incredibly neat. That means if you want to know how well I'm doing, some people they look very busy when you come and you see their desk. You know those people that have papers on top of papers and they're all just all over the place and they look like so important and such busy people. And you say, oh, can you help me with this? And once let me find this here, I'm going to look. By me, my life is doing great when my desk has 0 on it. Right now it has a pile of papers in the corner. It's driving me nuts. Declutter. Oh, I have another neat person in the crowd. You're proud of me. I am telling you, when I was in yeshiva, I learned to stand on yeshiva. If a bacher wanted a little snack from me, I always had snack. I don't know, maybe Syrians have food, I'm not sure. I would always tell him, listen, you could go to my second drawer, to the left, on the middle row, in the back, 2 from the end, you could find the wafer. And the guy would be like, what? I'd be like, why? Where's the wafer in your drawer? He's like, crushed. That's when because you know what happens? At least I find this way. I'm one of those people, by the way, my little slavery to the phone is I'll show you my little flip phone here. You see this? There's no lights. If there's any unread messages, I can't, once there's no unread messages or they're all clean, that means my head is clear. But if there's someone I have to respond to, it's just, so if you could declutter, that all of a sudden creates a little bit of daylight. One more example. Compliment a worker in a store, school, or restaurant. Like I said before, everybody is working more than, I'll give you one more also. Everyone is working much more than they ever anticipated. And you know what they need? They need to know they're doing a good job. And you might say, oh, they did a good job yesterday. Oh, they didn't get fired yesterday, they're doing a good job. No, they need to know they're doing a good job. And when someone comes over, if you ever had a teacher in class, I'll give you a little example. I tell you this story meant so much to me. When I was in 12th grade in yeshiva, we had a Rabbi in Staten Island who was very, very busy with the simple pshat. He felt that all of us think we're geniuses, and we don't know the simple pshat, what to us of what's asking, what he's answering, how he's answering, and he drove us crazy about it. Years later, I grabbed yeshiva, went to Israel, learning in Lakewood, in Kollel in Lakewood, and I met this Rebbe at a bris. Maybe it's 10 years after I was out of his class. And I said to him, I said, Rebbe, every day when I learn Tosfos, I learn it the way you taught us. What's he asking? How's he answering it? I learn it the way you taught us. He said to me, Yosef, wow, I appreciate that so much. Fantastic. 10 years later, I bump into a person I know. I said, where do you learn? He says, I'm in 12th grade in Staten Island Yeshiva. I said, wow, you're in 12th grade? Who's your Rebbe? Rebbe is Rabbi, he's this and so and so. He says, yeah. I said, wow, I got to tell you a story. I said, that Rebbe used to drive us crazy about what's the kasha, what's the teretz. 10 years after I was in his class, I gave him a compliment and told him that every day I learned based on the way he taught us. The boy says to me, so you're the guy? I said, what do you mean? He says, every year since, he tells his class, you don't understand me today. You may not appreciate it, but one day you're going to appreciate it, because I had a bacher in my class, thought he was a genius, and 10 years later he told me how much he appreciated it. This Rebbe is an incredible Rebbe that has had hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of Talmidim. His sons are incredible Rabbeim. He's an incredible person, but he appreciated one compliment from one random bacher who went through his shir. One compliment. So I think we went through enough of these. I think every single one of them are incredible. If you could take upon yourself one of these things to do for 40 days, or I think even more exciting, be to do one of them each day, it'll bring light into your life. Because all of a sudden, you know what happens when you give someone else a compliment, you make someone else feel good? You start to feel good. And you start to feel alive. And it wakes you up. There's a lot of people when they wake up in the morning are not in the mood for the day. But once you start to give to others, and once you start to bring a little bit of light from 1 minute, 1 second, one thing, it starts to build. I want to tell you something incredible that I think it just means so much. If you were to take, and I read this years ago and I've used it many times, if you were to take a piece of paper and fold it 50 times, how high would that paper be? So can you take the paper, now you fold it once, so now you got 2 pages. So it's this thin. Let's say you fold it again. Obviously the paper would have to be much longer, much longer than this. How high would the paper be? Do you have any idea? I've asked this to many crowds. Some people say it'll be 1 inch. Some people say 3 inches. Some people go very bold. They'll be like 4 feet wide. The paper will be 4 feet high. I said, let me tell you the answer. The answer is if you took a piece of paper and folded it 50 times, you know how wide it would be? It would be from here to the moon. To the moon. Let's do the math. Because you fold it, first it's 2 pages, then it's 4, then it's 8, then it's 16, then it's 32, then it's 64, then it's 125. It's really 128, but let's go 125. Then you're at 250, then you're at 500, then you're at 1,000. That's just 10. Then it's 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 60,000. By the time you're up to 20, it's 1 million. By the time you're up to 30, it's 1 billion. By the time you're up to 40, it's a trillion. And by the time you're up to 50, I don't even know the number anymore. It's so incredibly high. I said once, all I did was fold the paper and then fold it again. Do one good act and then do it again. And then do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. A split second. Again, and again, and again, and you have light. I'll give you one little cool little story. I went to Israel about a month and a half ago with a group of boys. So they actually left the day before me. I had to stay back for a speech or whatever, a wedding and a funeral. And I left on Sunday night. My flight was 11:45. I get there on time, get on the plane. The plane pulls out of the gate, goes on the runway. It's waiting a little bit, then it's waiting. The pilot says we need another 10 minutes. Okay, no problem. Right as the pilot says we need 10 minutes, some Israeli guy starts yelling, Arba! Arba! What's Arba? Arba. We're not leaving until Arba. What do you mean? We're not leaving till 4 o'clock. I said, it's 11:45. He says, Arba. Sure enough, the flight took off at 3:45 a.m. So somehow this guy ended up, some computer broke, 1 out of 70 computers, they brought it back to the gate, 10 minutes, 3:45. Now sometime by the end of the flight, this man ended up in front of me. He's an older man, like in his 60s or 70s. I don't know if that's called old, but whatever. And he's in front of me, and he has no idea who I am, I have no idea who he is. And he's telling me his story. And this guy is Chiloni, completely irreligious. When I say completely irreligious, he says, I lived in New York for many years. He says, my wife, you know how we met? He says, I was at a party, drunk all night. I fell asleep, hungover. She woke me up in the morning, and we started dating. That's how we met. So I'm like, oh, wow, this is okay, fantastic. I said, he says, do you want to hear my story? I said, you already told me more than I need to know. He says, well, let me tell you my story. I said, okay, what is it? He says, I used to sell electronics in the Bronx. One day a man comes over to me and he opens up a bag. He says, I'll sell you everything in this bag for $5. There's a couple of old broken radios, clearly stolen, for $5. He says, I look into the bag and I see some black leather. I say, hey, 1 second. What is that? He tells the guy, you know what, here's the $5, I'll take the bag. He takes the bag, opens it up, and on the bottom of the bag, there's tefillin. So he says, it must be, there's a shul down the block. He calls the rabbi of the shul. He says, I want you to know, I got this bag, I don't need the radios, it's really this tefillin, and I bought it for just in case one of your members had his tefillin stolen, you give it back to him. The rabbi took it. 2 weeks later, the rabbi calls him back, he says, and says, this guy telling me the story. He says, the rabbi calls me back and says, no one came to retrieve it, take it back. The person obviously gave up, and whatever the story is, it's you could keep it. Whether that's halakha or not is not for now. He says a few months later, his father passed away. And someone told him, you know what, there's this thing that Jews do. They say Kaddish for the week. He says, Kaddish, I don't know what Kaddish, I don't know what it is, I don't know anything about it. Another friend tells him, you say Kaddish for the month. Someone else tells him, you say Kaddish for the year. He says, 1 second, they're telling me to say Kaddish, and I have these tefillin. He said, let me try. He went to shul one day to say Kaddish for his father, put on tefillin, and say Kaddish for his father. He says, I have not missed a day of tefillin in 35 years since. Just one moment of daylight. Do one move, one act, one thing, and it makes such a humongous difference in your life. But all you need is the courage to do it once. And every one of these is an excuse. I'm not going to say hi. I don't really know that person. One of these things was, I think there's somewhere on here, it says to give a hug. Hug someone. Give someone a hug. That's going to sound very weird, but I'm going to tell you a funny story about the hug in terms of the daylight. We had, a few months ago, we had a Friday night event. I don't normally do Friday night events. These are the two I did all year. A Friday night event. And we had a guest speaker from LA. You've all heard of him. Come to speak by us. His name is Yoel Gold. You've heard of Yoel Gold? So he was in New York and he came to speak by us. He walks into the room. We have a room of 350 people sitting there on a Friday night. He walks into the room and he sees me and gives me a humongous hug. A big bear hug. Now let me tell you the truth. I never met Yoel Gold before in my life. I knew about him, never met him before in my life. But you know what? He gave me a hug. And then when he spoke, he gave me a compliment. And by the time he got off the stage, I felt like I was his best friend. I said, wow, that hug was the weirdest thing I ever saw. And you know what else it was? The most beautiful thing I ever saw. And I didn't need the hug, but somehow I needed the hug and appreciated the hug. So when someone goes out and you bring light. Light doesn't naturally come. Our brains have, I told you about one fly. So many of our brains have like 30 flies up there, all spinning around all different places. You can't even see anything. And naturally, the flies just tell you, go to sleep, stay in bed. It's much easier that way. Light needs to be created. The Pasuk says, Vayi erev, vayi boker. Hashem says, first I created darkness. And then I created light, because you need to make the light. You need to bring the light. You need to appreciate the light. Nobody feels like bringing light. Maybe some days you have a personality, very outgoing, you do, but most people naturally just want to sag and go away. But if you bring it out, if you make it happen, it's incredible the impact you can have. The holiday that we are celebrating is a holiday that 1 second created the freedom. 1 second created the freedom. We just left a holiday where someone was the most powerful person in the world, and he was a slave and brought about his own demise. And then we read about Hashem says, now you're going to go into a holiday where I'm going to teach you what freedom looks like. Freedom looks like 1 second, but you know how that second happens? What's the difference between matzah and chametz? What is that second? One energetic, hard-working second. 1 second when you say, I got to do it now. I'm not waiting. That kind of second is the second that makes a difference. Not just any second. It's a working second. It's that split second when you say, you know what, I'm about to walk by the person. Let me say hi. It's that split second when you say, let me say something nice. It's that split second when you go into your car deck and you say, should I turn on the radio and I hear some other crazy thing about Biden? Or should I turn on the shiur and uplift my ride? Split second. That split second where you go a little bit against your nature and you make one move, that's when you bring light into the world. I'm going to conclude with this one beautiful story. So when you're out there in the world and you're not in your own community, if you get to see one Jew, it feels like oxygen. So we've been in Cornell Hospital for the last month, in and out. I see two women having a conversation. One woman, two Jewish women. One woman is a Satmar Chassid. Her name is Teitelbaum. She's related to the late Satmar Rebbe of Yoel Teitelbaum. She calls over the other woman, and she says to this other woman, I heard you have a story about the Satmar Rebbe. The other woman says, yeah, let me share with you the story. And I'm watching this conversation. The woman says, my husband and I are married now for almost 51 years. She says, but when we first got married, for the first few years, we had no children. She says, and we were friendly with a Satmar Chassid, and the Satmar Chassid told her husband, she says, to go to the Rebbe to get a beracha. So she says, her and her husband went to the Rebbe to get a bracha. The Rebbe only sees men. The woman had to stay. She says she stood behind the door. Her husband went into the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, what is it? You need a bracha? He says, I need a bracha to have children. And she says her husband was given a bracha by the Rebbe to have children. And then the Rebbe asked her husband, she says, what do you do? He says, I used to work, I really work, but I just made a decision to stop working and start learning and move to Israel and start learning Torah. The Rebbe grabbed her husband's hand and said to him, you should have a beracha, you should be incredibly successful with your Torah learning. And the husband and wife left the room. They went back home. The Satmar Chassid who brought them there brought them back home. And the Satmar Chassid, she says, tells her husband, who grabbed whose hand? Did you grab the Rebbe's hand or the Rebbe grabbed your hand? He says, I wouldn't grab the Rebbe's hand. The Rebbe grabbed my hand. The Chassid said, you know why? Because the Rebbe was so impressed that you made a move. You made a move to start learning Torah. He grabbed your hand to bless you, because he couldn't believe that you had the courage to make a move like that. And the two women end the conversation, and now I pipe in, and I tell the Satmar lady, I said, you see this woman you're talking to? She's my mother. And the baby that was born a year after that beracha was me. And you know what happened? My father went on to learn and became a rabbi and wrote countless sefarim. And he has 9 children. All of them are rabbis teaching Torah, either rabbis or married to rabbis. Said one move, one decision to put down the phone or put down the pen and say, I'm going to start learning Torah, made such a humongous difference in the Torah world. It's such a humongous difference. Light doesn't happen by just waking up in the morning and there is light. Light happens when you know that nature says my brain wants to feel like a slave. We got talked into it. We got convinced into it. Maybe something happened in our life. Somehow, some way, that little fly got into our brain and that cartoon character is sitting there and doesn't want to leave. And all he wants is us to shut down and feel like our life like a mental, emotional slave. Our job is to learn the lesson, that 1 second, that one move, that one little step, one fold of the paper, one hello, one hug, one compliment, one handshake, one idea, one little shiur, one move, one time buying $5 of tefillin. One move can change your world. So if you want to experience freedom, don't wait for it to happen. Bring in your life one energetic second. Over the next 40 days, make a commitment to either do one of these things all 40 days or one thing every day. And when you have in your day that 1 second with energy and momentum, it is unbelievable how much light you can create. Because once you fold the paper, you have no idea. It can literally reach the moon. Thank you and good night.